What would you do if your own sister called you a disgrace while standing in the company you built from scratch? My name is Bianca Renard, and for the past 10 years, I lived like I didn't exist. No social media, no birthday calls, no family barbecues, just silence. Not because I did something wrong, but because I was convinced by the people I loved most that I was the problem, that I was a disgrace. And that word disgrace didn't come from a stranger. It came from my sister Malene. In a room full of polished elites and polished lies, she said it loud enough for the entire banquet hall to hear. I don't know why she's even here. She's an embarrassment, a walking failure. She stood there smug in her designer navy blazer, champagne flute in hand, surrounded by people applauding her success. She didn't recognize me. Not with the weight I'd shed, not with the sharp gray dress, not with the name tag that read simply, consultant. To her, I was nobody. Just another face at the back of the room, and honestly, I was fine letting her believe that. But fate. Fate had other plans. Just as the closing speaker stepped on stage, a CEO known more for numbers than names, he paused mid-sentence. His eyes locked with mine from across the crowd. Then slowly, deliberately, he spoke into the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, before we end tonight, I want to acknowledge someone very special. The original founder, the reason this company exists today, Miss Bianca Renard. The room froze. Silverware clinked against porcelain, mouths parted, heads turned, and Malene. She went pale. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't need to, because the truth was finally speaking louder than their lies. But to understand what really happened, you have to go back to where it all began, before the titles, before the betrayal, back to when I was just a woman in a garage with an idea no one believed in. And the real betrayal hadn't even happened yet. Back in 2009, I wasn't trying to build a company. I was trying to build a solution. I was 31, burned out from a decade in environmental consulting, watching corporations pump toxic waste behind closed doors while slapping green stickers on their websites. The hypocrisy made me sick. So I left. I rented a drafty garage in Silver Lake, bought 2 folding desks off Craigslist, and hired a couple of interns who believed in idealism over paychecks. We built prototype after prototype smart sensors that could monitor and reduce industrial waste in real time. I called it Verdance, a mix of verdant and conscience. Idealistic, maybe. But it was mine. I lived off instant ramen, slept on the concrete floor, took out loans under my name, sacrificed every safety net I had. But the mission kept me breathing. My boyfriend at the time, Ethan, joined as CTO. Smart, charismatic, said all the right things, and for a while, it worked. One client led to 3. A Green Tech Award landed us a glowing profile in Fast Company. Suddenly, we had buzz. But buzz attracts money, and money changes everything. When we signed our Series B funding, I still remember how the pen felt in my hand. I had just enough equity left to stay involved, but no longer the majority. It's temporary dilution, Ethan assured me. We'll regain control once we go public. I believed him. But that was the moment I unknowingly handed them the knife. Within 6 months, Ethan wasn't just charming me. He was charming the board, whispering about founder burnout, evolving leadership. I was pushed into a transition role. By the end of the year, I was gone. My name scrubbed from the website, my email deleted overnight. When I walked past the very building I helped design, the security guard stopped me like I was some random passerby. I had built the walls, but now I wasn't even allowed through the door. And when I came home to my family, devastated, exhausted, destroyed, they didn't fight for me. My mother stirred her tea and said, "Maybe it's for the best. You were always a little overambitious." Overambitious. That's what they called it when I refused to marry Ethan just to keep my seat on the board. That's what they called it when I cried alone on the kitchen floor. And Malene. She didn't comfort me. She smirked. Like I had proven every ugly thing she ever whispered behind my back. like I'd confirmed that I was a fool in a power suit playing pretend. And the cruelest part, I had paid off part of her college tuition just a year before. I helped her land her first job in public affairs, because I thought being the eldest meant lifting others. Turns out in my family, the more you lift, the quicker they climb over you. So I disappeared. No goodbyes, no announcements, just 2 suitcases, a severed past, and a vow to never be that open again. But you can only stay hidden so long before the ghosts of your own story come knocking. I left with 4 figures in my bank account, and even less in my spirit. No press release, no scandal, just erasure. I deleted every social profile, changed my number, and rented a small apartment above a coffee shop in Oregon under the name B.R. Taylor. No one looked for me. No one called. And maybe that was the part that broke me the most. My family. They carried on like I never existed. At holidays, they toasted Malene's new titles, Director of Public Affairs, Top 40 Under 40, like I hadn't once paved the road she now glided across in heels. I probably bought her. My name vanished from the family newsletter. I heard from a cousin that there were rumors, that I was in rehab, because in my family, failure isn't a setback, it's a disease, and the cure erased the patient. I was grieving something I couldn't bury, not just the company, but the betrayal, the silence, the realization that the people who raised me couldn't recognize the cost of what I tried to build. But in that silence, I found something sacred. I began working under the radar, quietly consulting for sustainability startups, mentoring young female founders who reminded me of myself before the world chewed me up. I never used my real name, never asked for credit. I just gave them the one thing I never had, a warning sign before the betrayal came. The only piece of Verdance I kept, a single framed blueprint of our first sensor prototype. No label, no signature, just lines and dreams behind glass. It hung above my desk for years, a relic from a life I pretended wasn't mine, and I made myself a promise. I would never step back into that world, unless it was on my terms. What I didn't expect was for the door back in to arrive through a mystery, an anonymous invitation, no sender, just a date, a location, and a single line. Honoring our legacy, celebrating our future. It landed in my inbox the same weekend as my father's birthday, the one I wasn't invited to. At first I was ready to delete it, but something about that phrase, our legacy, felt like a ghost reaching out. So I said yes. I bought a simple gray dress, pinned up my hair, and walked back into a world that had done everything to forget me. I didn't expect recognition. I didn't even expect to be noticed. But what I found, that was something no one, not even Malene, was prepared for. The building had a new name now, Delaney Tech Clean Solutions. The old Verdance logo gone, replaced by muted tones and a sleeker design. But I knew the bones, the curved green lines on the brochure. They were mine. I'd sketched that arc on a napkin in a diner at midnight Sharpie, bleeding onto Ethan's coffee cup. Now it was branding. Now it was theirs. I stepped through the glass doors like a ghost. The lobby gleamed. The crowd buzzed. It was all so polished. And in the corner of the room stood the person I never wanted to see again, Malene. She floated through the gala like a queen, blonde waves, impeccable posture, gold name tag glinting under the lights, Malene Renard, Director of Public Affairs. Of course, it shouldn't have surprised me. She'd always known how to take up space in a room she didn't help build. She gave a welcome speech full of buzzwords: legacy, corporate citizenship, green future. It was hollow, but the crowd clapped. They didn't know what she didn't know, that her big break into this company had come from me. Years ago, I had reluctantly recommended her name to an old colleague after she'd been laid off from a government job. She never thanked me, probably didn't even remember. In her mind, I had vanished, and maybe that made it easier to pretend she'd climbed this ladder herself. I stayed in the back, just another middle-aged consultant with a name no one remembered, until I asked a question. Not with my voice, but anonymously through the event app. It was technical precise, the kind of question only someone who had built the entire system from scratch could even think to ask. During a panel on sustainable infrastructure, the moderator read it aloud. Malene squinted. "That's a very specific question," she said, her voice tightening. "Not sure anyone here would frame it that way." Then she laughed. "Sounds like someone's been digging through our old files." The audience chuckled politely. I didn't. Later, I stepped out onto the terrace for some air, and I felt her before I saw her. Malene approached Wineglass in hand, head tilted. "Do I know you?" she asked. I turned slightly. "I don't think so." She looked me over slowly. "Strange. You look familiar, like someone I used to know, back when my family was falling apart." Then she smirked. "Are you one of those consultants who think they know more than the people running the show?" I didn't answer. "People like you are a dime a dozen," she said. "Honestly, if you're trying to impress someone, it's not working." She stepped closer, voice lowering to a whisper. "You look like someone my sister used to hang around. Total disgrace, wasted potential, self-important emotional wreck." I met her gaze. "You don't say." And just then, a voice behind her cleared their throat. "Malene." We both turned. It was Mr. Delaney, the CEO. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were locked on me. "I think it's time you reintroduced yourself," he said. Malene turned to him, smile twitching. "Oh, I didn't know you were out here." He nodded once, then said clear as crystal, "Bianca, you came." Her face cracked. "Did you just say Bianca?" she asked. Her voice climbed just a little too high. "Bianca Renard." I gave her the smallest smile. "Hi, Malene. It's been a while." She froze. You could see the math happening behind her eyes. My age, the timing, the scandal, the whispered rumors. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her wineglass like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "I didn't recognize you," she muttered. "I gathered," I said. Mr. Delaney folded his hands calmly behind his back. "I had hoped you two might run into each other," he said, "though perhaps not exactly like this." "Oh, we've spoken," I said, "just not formally." Malene blinked, trying to recover. "We didn't know you'd be here," she said. "I didn't either," I replied. "But your company's invitation was hard to resist. Something about honoring legacy." Her mouth opened, then shut. Panic flickered behind her mascara. Not guilt, Malene never really did guilt, but fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of what people would say if they knew the woman she just humiliated was the one who made her career possible. She tried to regroup. "Well, this is surprising. We didn't know where you'd gone. We thought you were, traveling. In transition. You mean the rumors you let float around while never once picking up the phone?" Her face hardened. "I was busy," she snapped, "and you weren't exactly easy to find." "I didn't disappear," I said. "I was erased." Even Mr. Delaney tilted his head. That word echoed like thunder over the terrace. Erased, and the past she tried to bury. It was about to stand center stage. There was a long silence after I said it. I was erased. Even Malene blinked. She wasn't used to hearing me speak that clearly, that calmly. She regrouped. "Well, regardless of the past," she said tightly, "tonight's about the future. We're proud of where the company is going." I nodded slowly. I am too, especially since I remember where it started. That one landed. The mask slipped. Her eyes flicked toward the glass doors of the ballroom as if someone might rescue her. But no one was coming. She leaned in, her voice low and biting. "What are you doing here, Bianca, trying to make some kind of scene?" I shook my head. "I didn't come to be seen. I came to remember. That used to be allowed." She scoffed. "This isn't your playground anymore. You left. You failed. You can't just walk in and expect applause." I looked her in the eye. "I'm not here for applause." And then, as if summoned by the universe itself, a young intern approached Mr. Delaney and whispered something. He nodded, then turned to both of us. "We're about to start the closing ceremony. I'd like you both to come in." Malene lit up a little too fast. "Of course." I'm actually presenting the closing remarks." He smiled politely, then turned to me. "Bianca, would you sit near the front? We have a seat reserved." Malene flinched, not visibly, but I felt it. "Reserved," she echoed. "She's our guest of honor," Mr. Delaney said simply. She didn't respond. She couldn't. Inside the hall, the lights dimmed. Music faded. Attendees settled into their chairs like school kids before an announcement. Malene stood near the stage, flipping through her cue cards with fingers that trembled just slightly. Mr. Delaney took the mic. His speech started as expected, thanking partners, acknowledging growth, painting the company's future in optimistic brushstrokes. And then he paused. "There's one more thing before we close tonight," he said, voice steady. "Something we owe both our future and our past." All eyes turned to the stage, then to me. He didn't rush. He let the silence stretch just long enough for every person in the room to lean in. "In this room tonight," he said, "is a woman most of you don't know. But you should, because you wouldn't be sitting here without her. I didn't move, but inside I was vibrating. Before I was CEO," he continued, "I was just an engineer with a clipboard. And the woman who gave me my first shot, who saw something in me when I didn't even see it in myself, was her." He turned fully toward me. "Miss Bianca Renard." The room erupted in sound, but not immediately. First a gasp, then a ripple, then a murmur that turned into a wave. People whispered, stared, glanced at one another, unsure whether to clap, to stand, to believe what they were hearing. And Malene. She stood frozen near the podium, her expression cracking piece by piece. She looked like someone who just realized the ground beneath her wasn't solid. Mr. Delaney kept going calm, certain, resolute. "Years ago, Bianca founded a company called Verdance. No money, no safety net. Just a blueprint, a belief, and a refusal to compromise. This company, though it's changed names, hands, and logos, is standing here today because of her." A long pause. "Some of you may not know that story. That's not your fault. Sometimes history is rewritten. Not by the victors, but by the ones afraid of the truth." He glanced briefly toward the front row. Malene didn't move. I sat perfectly still, not out of fear, but because that kind of stillness only comes when someone finally speaks a truth you carried alone for years. She didn't ask to be honored. She didn't even tell me she'd be here. But when I saw her name on the guest list, I knew we had a choice: to continue pretending or to start remembering. Then he turned to the crowd. "So I ask you now to stand, to offer your thanks to the woman who gave this company its first breath." The first person to rise was in the back, then another, then 5. Then the entire room rose to their feet. The applause was slow, uncertain, but then it rolled like thunder. I didn't rise. I didn't wave. I just sat there, still composed, as the sound washed over the ache that had lived in my chest for a decade. It didn't erase what they did. It didn't erase who they forgot. But it validated the one thing they couldn't take: the truth. Mr. Delaney held out his hand. "Bianca, would you join me for a moment?" I walked to the stage slowly. Malene stepped aside, her cue card still in hand, her mouth slightly open, but no words came. I took the mic, scanned the room. "Thank you. I won't take your time because this moment isn't about reclaiming anything. I didn't come tonight expecting to speak. I didn't even come expecting to be seen. But I'm grateful. Not for the applause, but for the acknowledgement that the things we build, even if taken from us, still matter." A breath. There was a time I thought walking away meant I failed. That being erased meant I wasn't worthy. But the truth is, I didn't fail. I walked to protect what I believed in. And I stand here now, not because I need redemption, but because I never needed to apologize in the first place. Silence. Then applause again. Not loud, not wild, but reverent. I handed the mic back, nodded, and stepped down. Malene didn't look at me. She couldn't. I didn't stay for dessert. Not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but because I didn't need anything else. Not the whispers, not the stares, not even her apology, which ironically came 3 days later. Just a text, short, blunt. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time. I thought I might feel satisfaction, or maybe pain, but all I felt was done. I didn't respond, because sometimes the cleanest answer is silence. Sometimes the deepest healing is letting go. Not with fury, not with fire, but with grace. And that, more than anything, was my closure. I returned home to Oregon the next morning. The blueprint I once kept framed on my wall, I took it down, not to throw it away, but to put it away. Not because I was ashamed, but because I no longer needed a reminder of who I was. I already knew. I still consult. I still mentor. I still help young women walk into boardrooms with open hearts and clear eyes, like I once did before I knew how sharp betrayal could be. But now I walk in too, not as a ghost, not as a cautionary tale, but as someone who survived the erasure and came back whole. Here's what I've learned. You can strip a name off a building, but you can't unbuild what someone gave their soul to create. And sometimes the most complete revenge isn't shouting louder. It's simply being undeniable. Have you ever been dismissed, erased, or underestimated by your own family? Tell your story in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story hit home for you, like the video, subscribe for more high-stakes family betrayals and hidden triumphs. Share this with someone who needs to know you are not invisible. And remember, silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's power waiting to speak. She called my work garbage, then deleted a year of my life with one click in front of 23 people. It happened on a dull Tuesday morning, one of those strange office days where the lights feel too bright and the silence carries too much weight, like something bad is about to happen and the building knows it before you do. I was sipping half-burnt coffee at my desk, the bitter taste sharp on my tongue, when my supervisor, Kendra Morell, appeared behind me. She didn't greet me, didn't even tap on my chair. Just a loud voice clipped and commanding everyone eyes on this. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Keyboards went still. 23 heads turned toward me and my screen. My heart gave a small thud. Some people leaned forward with mild interest. Others shifted uncomfortably. I saw one colleague, the usually chatty Rob, quietly swivel his chair away, like trying to pretend he wasn't watching. Kendra pointed to my desktop and said it with the conviction of a judge passing sentence. This is what inefficiency looks like. A full year of wasted time. This is garbage. And without even looking at me, she double-clicked the folder I had named, Client Continuity Audit 2022. I watched as 53 pages of detailed relationship data loaded on the main screen. Names, notes, birthdays, small insights about client preferences and personal milestones, all carefully tracked over 12 grueling months. Then with a deliberate pause, she hovered her cursor over the delete icon. My stomach dropped. I felt a strange tingling in my hands, like the oxygen had been drained from the room. What she was about to erase wasn't a spreadsheet. It was proof of my instincts. Evidence that people, not processes, were what built loyalty. My late nights replying to emails from business owners who needed reassurance. My Sunday afternoons spent writing birthday notes for client daughters or checking in on family-owned stores struggling through inflation. And she clicked. Just like that, it was gone. The screen blinked blank. There were no gasps, no apologies. Just a cold stillness, thick and electric. I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, the low wheeze of the HVAC. Someone coughed into their sleeve. That's how quiet it had become. I stared straight ahead, my body motionless, but my mind a storm. Rage, humiliation, grief. They all swirled together, pressing hot behind my eyes. I blinked hard. I wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of her. My throat tightened. I could feel heat crawling up my neck, my ears pounding with the dull rhythm of shock. My knees locked. Even the chair beneath me felt like it wasn't mine. I gripped the edge of my desk so tightly, my nails left tiny crescent dents in the wood grain. Beside my keyboard sat a small thank you card, a handwritten note from Lena Carrington, one of our long-term clients. "Thank you for remembering what most people forget," it read. It had arrived just a week ago, a quiet reminder that what I did mattered. I glanced at it now, sitting there like a witness to a crime. Suddenly, it felt like everything around me was mocking my effort. This wasn't the first time I had felt invisible. I remembered months ago sitting in my car after a brutal review where Kendra told me I was overreaching by adding too much detail to client reports. I had cried in that parking lot, wondering if I should quit, wondering if I was too soft for this industry. But I didn't quit. And now, after clawing my way toward a strategy that worked, one that brought warmth into cold corporate structure, she had erased it with a single gesture, like it meant nothing, like I meant nothing. Kendra turned from the screen, smoothing her blazer with smug finality, like she'd cleaned up a mess and expected applause, like deleting that file proved some kind of point. She looked at me briefly, not a glance of sympathy, but of triumph. She thought she'd won. She thought she had stripped me of credibility, made an example of my methods. She had no clue what she'd actually done. Because what she deleted wasn't mine alone. It was the invisible thread binding our clients to this company. She didn't destroy my work. She dismantled the foundation holding her own world up. And then right as she launched into a sermon about returning to professional efficiency, my phone buzzed, loud in the silence. I glanced down. The name flashing on my screen almost made me laugh. Marlowe Partners. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the phone. I hadn't spoken to them in months, and yet somehow they had perfect timing. Because while Kendra thought she was deleting some inefficient documents, she was actually handing me the cleanest, most elegant revenge I could have imagined. And that's when I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. After the meeting ended, I sat frozen at my desk, unsure whether to stand, breathe, or disappear entirely. The room buzzed back to life around me. Chairs scraping muted conversations, starting again, but none of it reached me. I was underwater, and everything above the surface felt miles away. No one said anything. Not one colleague came over. And maybe I didn't expect them to. But it still stung the way they pretended not to see me, the way their eyes darted anywhere but in my direction. I wasn't just invisible. I was radioactive. I opened my email to distract myself, but I couldn't focus. My hands hovered above the keyboard, trembling. Every key I pressed felt hollow. The weight of what just happened crushed down on my spine. My work, my identity, my reputation, all wiped out in seconds. The phone call from Marlowe Partners. I hadn't returned it. I couldn't, not yet. My pride was buried somewhere under the shame I couldn't shake. What if they didn't really mean it? What if it was pity? I spent the rest of the day moving like a ghost, responding to emails. I couldn't remember sitting in meetings. I barely registered, nodding at things I didn't understand. My head pulsed with a migraine that refused to fade. That night, I sat in the dark of my apartment, lights off, blanket wrapped around my shoulders like armor. My laptop was open in front of me, cursor blinking in a blank resignation email draft I couldn't bring myself to finish. The apartment felt colder than usual, as if it too had absorbed the humiliation I carried. My plants drooped on the windowsill. Dishes from the morning sat untouched in the sink. Even my cat Baxter, curled up silently by the radiator, watched me with worried eyes like he knew something had cracked open inside me. I thought about quitting. Not just the job, everything. I thought about the birthday I'd forgotten last year because I stayed late fixing a client file. About the trip to see my mother that I canceled to meet a reporting deadline. About the after-hours check-ins, the holiday weekends where I answered emails, the nights I went to sleep with a spreadsheet still open beside my bed. And I thought about Kendra. I remembered the first time I showed her my client engagement notes. She hadn't even read them. Just flipped the pages, looked up with narrowed eyes, and said, "Do you think this is a coffee shop or a consulting firm?" That sentence stuck to me like gum on the bottom of a shoe. No matter how hard I tried to scrub it off, it clung. I had given everything to a company that saw me as expendable. Worse, as laughable. At 2:17 a.m., I finally typed a single sentence into the email draft. "You erased my work, but you will never erase my worth." Then I deleted it. Not because I didn't mean it, but because I realized something else. They didn't deserve my exit letter. They didn't deserve closure. I deserved to decide what came next, not in the shadow of humiliation, but in the full light of who I was becoming. And the more I sat with that silence, the more I understood it wasn't emptiness. It was space. Space to choose something better, to answer the call that waited on my phone, to build something real, to stop playing small just to make insecure people feel safe. And so just before dawn, I picked up my phone and called back Marlowe Partners. The woman on the other end, her voice was warm, steady. "Maya, we were hoping to hear from you." And for the first time in 20 hours, my body relaxed. When they asked if I was ready to talk details, I didn't whisper. I spoke with the full strength of a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. 2 days after the public humiliation, I returned to the office not to make peace, not to rebuild what was taken, but to deliver the end of a chapter with the dignity it deserved. I wore a slate gray blazer I had been saving for important meetings. My hair was pulled back sharp. My eyes didn't dart. They locked. The air in the building was heavy, hesitant. People whispered when they saw me. A few offered weak nods. Most avoided my gaze. Maybe they thought I was back to apologize. Maybe they expected me to beg for reinstatement, to grovel for some semblance of belonging. They couldn't have been more wrong. At 9:03 a.m., I stepped into the conference room, the same one where Kendra had called my work garbage. She looked up from her laptop, startled. "Maya, I wasn't expecting you this morning." "I know," I replied evenly, "but you'll want to hear this." Richard Vance, the CEO, had already arrived. He gave me a cautious nod. "Is this about what happened earlier this week?" "In part," I said. "But this is also about what comes next." I placed a single printed page on the table, my resignation dated and signed effective immediately. Kendra blinked. "This is unnecessary. We haven't made any formal decisions about your status." I looked at her calm and clear. "You already did when you erased a year of client trust in front of the department. You made it clear how you value relationships, so now I'm simply responding with clarity of my own." Silence. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of handwritten notes, copies of messages, thank you cards, printouts of client testimonials. I laid them gently on the table, like setting down evidence at a trial. "You thought you deleted a file," I said. "What you really did was delete the only thing keeping our top clients here." I turned to Richard. "You said last quarter that our retention rates were the highest in company history. That wasn't a fluke. That was built conversation by conversation, moment by moment. And now it's gone." Richard studied me, his brow furrowed. "I'm leaving," I said. "But I'm not leaving broken." I took a deep breath. "I've accepted a position with Marlowe Partners as Director of Client Relations. They believe in personal connection. They're building something new. And I intend to help them do it." The room went still again. Kendra's face flushed, but she forced a brittle smile. "You think you can just walk away and take everything with you? I'm not taking anything I said. But clients are free to follow the relationships they trust." It was the first time I'd seen her speechless. As I stood there, the lights above seemed to hum louder than usual, casting a glow over the table like a spotlight on an unplanned stage. My palms were dry now, something that surprised me. I expected to tremble, to fumble over words, but instead I felt rooted, solid. Richard shifted in his seat. He glanced briefly at the handwritten notes I had laid out. One in particular caught his eye, a card from Darla Nguyen, our catering client. I saw his expression change when he read her words. "Working with Maya made us feel like more than revenue. She reminded us we matter." He looked up but said nothing. In the far corner, I noticed Erin, one of the junior analysts, watching me with wide, unblinking eyes. She had always been quiet, always stayed in her lane, and yet in that moment, her gaze spoke more than any voice in the room. "Thank you." Funny. Just a year ago, I would have been the one in the corner terrified to raise my hand. I used to shrink myself to fit the mold of what this place rewarded: short emails, quick calls, faceless efficiency. And now here I was, not just speaking up, but walking away. Do you really think clients will just follow you, Kendra? Finally asked, her tone sharp with disbelief. Out of loyalty, I paused. No, I said, not out of loyalty. Out of trust, out of connection, out of being seen. And that's when the room changed. The silence became heavier, not hostile, but reflective. Like a mirror had been placed in front of them, and they were just now realizing what they'd allowed to happen. I gathered the resignation letter and the client cards, slid them back into my bag with care. Richard stood. Maya. If circumstances were different, but they're not. I interrupted gently. You had the data. You had the proof. And you let it be destroyed. So now I'm going where that proof is not just seen, but valued. The walk from the conference room to the elevator felt like a procession. My heels clicked against the tile like punctuation marks in a closing sentence. Some heads turned, some stayed bowed. No one stopped me. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside and faced forward, not looking back. And for the first time in a long time, I felt tall. Not because I had finally proven something, but because I had nothing left to prove. The days after I handed in my resignation passed in an eerie silence. No dramatic confrontations, no vindictive emails, no aggressive moves, just a quiet that felt heavier than any storm. I watched as everything I had built, one conversation, one genuine connection at a time, started to shift beneath the surface. At Marlowe Partners, I found a new home. Their culture was the exact opposite of what I'd left behind, energized, empathetic, and committed to putting people first. Here my approach wasn't a liability, it was a strength. They celebrated what I had fought for, not punished it. Meanwhile, back at Piton Analytics, cracks began to appear in the glossy facade. I didn't make any calls to lure clients away. I didn't send mass emails or beg people to follow me. I simply stayed true to my values, continuing to deliver care and attention to those who reached out. The fallout was silent but devastating. Clients who once answered to Kendra's team now began to hesitate, pause, and question. Meeting requests from Piton were declined with vague excuses. Follow-up slowed and then stopped. The smooth rhythm of client retention was faltering. Industry whispers grew louder. Rumors about shifting loyalties and deteriorating trust spread quietly through professional networks. Some clients reached out in hushed tones, curious if I was really where they thought I was. Others made decisions in the shadows, choosing to take their business elsewhere. One afternoon, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Donnie Harlan, the owner of that mid-sized manufacturing company whose golden retriever I'd asked about during a call months ago. Maya, he said carefully, I've been watching how things are at Piton. Honestly, we're planning to move our accounts. You're the reason we stayed this long. His words hit me harder than I expected. Later that same week, Lena Carrington scheduled an extra consultation saying, "You made us feel like partners, not just revenue." That kind of personal care is rare. Each phone call, each message confirmed a painful truth for Kendra. Loyalty isn't coded into systems or stored in databases. It lives in moments of connection, trust, and being truly seen. Moments she tried to erase. Meanwhile, Kendra's frustration became palpable. Through contacts still inside Piton, I heard she was frantically reaching out to major clients scrambling to patch the damage. But once trust breaks, it doesn't mend with apologies. The quiet storm I set in motion didn't crash like thunder or blaze like wildfire. It crept in, slowly, steadily, relentlessly, as sure as roots, pushing through concrete. The company faced the worst client retention crisis in its history, and from my new office I watched the slow unraveling, not with vengeance, but with quiet satisfaction. Because sometimes the most devastating power isn't in loud battles, it's in waiting. When the emergency board meeting was called, the atmosphere shifted from hushed rumors to cold, hard reckoning. The numbers on the reports were devastating. Over 60% of Piton Analytics' largest clients had fled or threatened to leave in the 2 months following my resignation. The missing client continuity audit, the file Kendra had deleted in front of everyone, was no longer just a lost document. It was the smoking gun, the proof of what had been built and destroyed in a single reckless act. The room was packed. Board members, senior managers, legal advisors. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the facts laid bare in detailed spreadsheets and client testimonies. And at the center of it all sat Kendra Morell, usually so composed, now visibly rattled. The questions came swift and unforgiving. Why was the client retention audit deleted without backup, a board member demanded. Kendra fumbled. I believed the approach was inefficient, the documentation unnecessary. But these losses, 60% of key clients in 2 months, are a direct consequence, another voice pressed. Kendra tried to redirect blame. The former employee's methods were unorthodox. Some clients followed her out of loyalty, but that's not a sustainable business practice. Emails surfaced, fragments of cold, dismissive messages from Kendra to clients, reports of unanswered calls, delayed follow-ups, and meetings canceled at the last minute. The very neglect she denied was now documented in black and white. Even her closest allies hesitated, exchanging glances, whispering doubts about her leadership. The fractures beneath her confident exterior were undeniable. Then the board heard from the clients themselves. Statements poured in, once silenced by corporate protocols, now candid and sharp. They spoke of personalized care, of being valued beyond numbers, of how Maya's genuine attention had built trust that no database could replace. One testimonial stood out from Darlene Nguyen, a longtime catering client. Losing Maya felt like losing a partner. Her attention made us feel seen and heard, not just another contract. The gravity of the situation pressed down on the board. This wasn't simply about client attrition. It was a crisis of leadership, vision, and trust. Behind closed doors, the board debated Kendra's future. The cost of her mismanagement was clear, and so was the price of inaction. Within weeks, Kendra was removed from her position. Her authority, once unquestioned, was stripped away as the company scrambled to stem the hemorrhaging. Meanwhile, the damage she wrought rippled outward. Years of goodwill and client loyalty dissolved in a matter of weeks. The financial losses were staggering, but the blow to the company's reputation was deeper still. I wasn't present in that meeting. I didn't need to be. The dominoes toppled on their own, the consequences of her choices playing out with relentless precision. And while Piton Analytics fought to rebuild on shaky ground, I was already building something better, a place where connection mattered, where relationships were nurtured, and where true value was recognized. The quiet truth was clear. The foundation she destroyed could only be rebuilt with trust and care, 2 things she had cast aside. After the chaos settled, what remained wasn't just a company in crisis, it was a woman transformed. Leaving Piton Analytics wasn't an end, it was a new beginning. At Marlowe Partners, I didn't just find a job. I found respect, autonomy, and a team that believed in what I believe, that people are the heart of business, not just numbers on a balance sheet. The promotion to senior partner came faster than I expected. Equity, participation, responsibility for expanding our client relationship philosophy across multiple service lines. It was everything I'd dreamed of but never dared to ask for. Clients who had followed me from Piton became the foundation of our most successful year. The relationships I'd nurtured, once dismissed as inefficient, were now the company's greatest asset. I watched from afar as Piton struggled through restructuring. 30% of staff laid off. Major offices sold, a merger with a competitor that valued efficiency metrics over genuine connection. Kendra Morell's departure was quietly noted in LinkedIn updates and whispered rumors. According to former colleagues, her last months were marked by attempts to salvage client relationships with the same impersonal tactics that had caused the collapse. I felt no joy in her downfall. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, and about truth finally prevailing. Every consulting firm was now investing in personal client relationship strategies. Every professional development program emphasized the importance of treating clients as individuals, not transactions. Every successful business recognized what I'd known all along. That success was built on authenticity, empathy, and connection. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or public. It's simply proving your worth through continued success while those who doubted you watch from the sidelines. Today I run the Client Relations Division for one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the region. Every day I work with clients who appreciate that I remember their birthdays, ask about their families, and care about their challenges, not because it's a strategy, but because it's who I am. And every day I'm reminded that the greatest freedom comes not from escape, but from becoming your true self and thriving on your own terms. If you've ever been undervalued, dismissed, or erased by people who should have seen your worth, remember this: your value isn't defined by their blindness. It's defined by your courage to keep going, your resilience to rebuild, and your power to rewrite your story. Have you ever faced a betrayal that pushed you to rise stronger? Share your story below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of quiet power, resilience, and ultimate triumph.